Our guest today is Ralph Tabberer. He's recently appointed as the Director General for Schools in the Department for Education and Skills. He was a teacher, but perhaps is better known as the former Chief Executive of what was then the Teacher Training Agency. That was at a time when we saw the number of teachers coming into the profession rise considerably. Now he spends his time working with the government in developing and implementing education policy. Ralph, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, your own education, from what I've read, it was a pretty usual sort of education. Tell us about it, and was it that influenced you to be a teacher yourself?
I had a very happy education, yes, particularly spectacular primary. Really enjoyed it and probably found I could do most things. Secondary, much tougher, harder work and much more varied performance probably. But I had some wonderful teachers and they're still kind of with me. The big defining thing I think in my secondary schools was getting some opportunities as an older student to teach some of the younger classes, and a couple of sessions of that and I was hooked. I didn't go through university thinking I'll teach, but when it came to the decision days, it was just a draw. I was drawn back to it. And I knew at the time, this is early mid-70s, that a lot of people like me who were looking at teaching as a really attractive offer. It was well rewarded. There were good prospects. I came down to work in London. And it was a time when you definitely wanted a job where you could make a difference. It was, and I think actually that same spirit's in the new people coming into the profession now.
Yeah, in terms of a problem in recruitment in between, but we might come back to that later on. You came to the department in 1997 when I came as a minister, but in between teaching and being a civil servant, you'd spent some time as an advisor.
I'd been in local authorities as an advisor, working in West Sussex with some fabulous people and schools. I'd spent some time as a researcher, and I'd done a bit of work as well in the computer revolution in the 80s. It's the sort of career that if you go back 20 years, if you met somebody with my portfolio, that you'd say, oh, thoroughly unreliable, done too many things. But one of the funny things now, of course, in our world, it's looked at as clever choices to vary experiences.
We're alike in that way. I spent 18 years in teaching and then left. You spent a number of years in teaching and then left. And very often I read that, that's a problem, that you read the headline, people flocking out of the profession. Times are changing, aren't they? I mean, do we need a new language for describing the journey of a teacher through the profession and through their working life?
Oh, I think so. I remember when I started at Teacher Training Agency 6.5 years ago, one of my earliest presentations was about the possibility of doing just 10 years in teaching. And at the time, people were affronted. It got into the papers. Why was a new person responsible for teacher recruitment almost seeming to encourage people to go? But it was very planned, because all of our research, all of our interaction with young people about careers was saying that they didn't think about doing one thing. They didn't want to think about doing one thing all their lives. They saw maybe they do 4, 5, 6 different careers. And actually, they were more attracted by a profession which said, do this for 5, 10 years, and then take a look. If you want to change, that's okay. So that the journey of being a teacher is massively different. It's you're in control of it.
Yeah. I must admit, though, when I talk to teachers now, and some of them do say, I'd like to do something else, I can't remember anyone who's actually said, I'd like to be a civil servant. And that was the change you made in 1997. So, I mean, what was the attraction in being a civil servant after having been a teacher and an advisor?
I think I was first drawn to work in the department. I'd been working just before that in research. I was first drawn because I wanted to know how policy worked and how the centre worked. Actually, from outside, I was trying to understand why it made so many bad decisions. And it just intrigued me. And I got offered a very interesting role building some pupil performance systems, pupil data systems. And it looked like a good place to learn. I didn't think I'd stay. But it's an immensely interesting place. You're working on...
Say a bit more about that, because I think a lot of teachers don't actually know what civil servants do. So, what would you spend your day doing?
I suppose if you summarise it, there's 2 parts. One part is you're involved in advising ministers on policy. And that doesn't mean you spend all day talking to them. you spend a lot of your time analysing, understanding how the system works, understanding what's currently a strength, what's a weakness. You understand what the politicians are trying to do. You understand how the system may respond, and you're processing all the evidence, all the possibilities, all the options, and you end up trying to give the minister the best possible advice about how they achieve their goals. And then the other part of it is the tough end, which is about turning the policy into practice, where you've, I don't know about you, but if I look back on the last 20 years of education, I think we've had great ideas and some pretty poor implementation. We've not been short of good ideas, we have been short of good implementers. So we spend a lot of time these days on how do we make this effective? How do we turn something like a new performance management system or a new set of safeguarding arrangements for children into something that really works on the ground?
Is there a feeling in this policy development that I suppose the momentum in politics is to seek a new initiative to move on because the electorate moves on, and you've got to seize the media agenda as well as the education agenda? How frustrating is that for a civil servant who, as you've just said, wants to stay the course and make sure that things are implemented as well as developed? Is there a tension there?
There's a real tension. There's a real tension. I'm still learning about it. It's normally the problem comes because we do something, we make a step forward, we recognise how we need to improve one aspect of policy, and we want to get on and solve bigger and bigger problems. And it's that appetite for improvement which you sometimes have to discipline, and you have to say, hold on a minute, we haven't cracked this problem yet, or we've got to give this more time to embed, or we've got to work harder at the implementation before we drive in another message. But that is difficult, because it sometimes means saying on important issues you have to wait. You're
as long out of teaching as I am, so are you still somebody with, could you describe yourself as what you now bring to the department is someone with teaching experience, or is it too far gone? How do you keep in touch with what's going on in schools from a teaching end? And secondly, does it matter whether you've had teaching experience in order to be a civil servant in the DFES? Does it make it better or easier?
I think I am a hybrid. I've worked inside, I've worked outside, and I think you're right to say that that's brought something extra. Working inside, you need some closeness to what's happening in schools. You need reality checks. You need somebody saying, that's stupid. I think also the civil service, I don't want to leave any impression that civil servants are Sir Humphreys or cynical. The civil service I work with, the people who've come up through that career, they're terrifyingly bright. They're ferociously intelligent. They are just as committed to learners and children.
In that traditional civil service route, I've not looked at the statistics recently, but we always used to think it was sort of public school into university, into the higher echelons of the civil service. That's not a description, I think it's fair to say, of senior levels of DFES now?
There's still that strong strand, but there's other people who came in as school leavers without necessarily going to university, who are at the senior levels, and they've come up through different routes. I mean, the department to some extent reflects society. And one thing I love now, of course, is that the head of the DFES, the permanent secretary,
teacher himself,
teacher, head teacher, local authority,
primary
primary head teacher, and
yeah.
He is an even better model of a hybrid than I am. He's
that is remarkable.
Ridiculously good. We ought to go recruiting in primary schools more often.
Yeah.
It works.
Talking about hybrids, I am very well aware of this rule that civil servants are not politicians. I actually found in practice that divide, that political divide, is far more wavery than perhaps people imagine. Just a comment about that. I mean, you're a human being, you're a citizen, you vote, you've got political views. You're working in a big political machine. How do you actually temper your wish to get politically involved? How does it all play out, and what role do the political advisors play in that?
That's a little bit of controversy in that question. There has to be a line. As a civil servant, you have to know and understand where that line is. You can't be political and be a civil servant. You can't combine the two. You mustn't. You must be a public servant. You've got to serve the elected ministers, the elected party, the elected government, and it's terribly important you don't cross a line. You don't become part of the values and that party, because if you do, then you can't work again with a different party. You'd have to change, and I don't actually have any problem with that.
Going back to your own career, when you became head of the then teacher training agency, quite honestly, as a politician at that time, we were facing daily, weekly stories of declining teacher numbers, and it was almost at the point where some schools were not being able to open because they didn't have a number of teachers in them. So, you know, a huge job, huge challenge, huge promotion at a really difficult time. What made you take it?
I'd been working for 2 or 3 years within a team trying to improve standards, and you became aware as part of the ministerial team there, and we became aware on our side that suddenly all the gains we were achieving were threatened, because how can you raise standards when children can't be in school? So it looked like a fascinating opportunity, and just I found myself wanting to grab it, and I think I was very lucky, because probably there were a lot of other people thinking, I don't want to do that at the moment. So I think I got a big opportunity. If
you think over the last 5 years, Ralph, as to I suppose the weapons that are now used, or the tools that are now used for recruiting teachers, it's about advertising. It's a massive amount in terms of golden hellos and training subsidies and not having to pay fees, and different routes into teaching. Do you have a sense of looking back of which of those were most influential? What really did the trick? What worked? Why have we now got more people going into teaching?
The reason we've got more people going in is because now we treat the whole business of recruitment to our industry, if you like, as seriously as other industries. We are profoundly competitive about the way we go about it, and we think about the systems with just the same rigour as somebody who is trying to recruit to the IT industry or to media or to other things. That's why we based all of our work on very good research into how people think, what affects people's career choices, and the TDA, as it now is, still does this every year very carefully. And you'll be really pleased to know that actually the motivation for coming into teaching hasn't changed. The big motivation is, I want to make a difference. I don't want to do a job which is I end up on the photocopier, or I end up moving a can of beans, or still a lot of people want jobs where they genuinely make a difference in young people's lives or in other people's lives. Yeah. And that's the message, that just by working at it, understanding what people are looking for, making changes within the profession, backing those changes, we've shifted now. And the big sort of mark that we've made a breakthrough was this last year in final year undergraduates, that group that we're always trying to compete for. For the first year on record, we were the first choice ahead of media and marketing.
That's brilliant.
It has changed.
That is a huge achievement in a relatively short period of time. But I suppose the media moves on and politics moves on, and what we see now is a great worry about the number of people going to head teachers.
Oh, it's a worry. It's not a pending crisis. It's not going to go wrong in the short term. But the good thing is we've spotted it, and we've spotted it in time. There is the risk that in 3 or 4 years' time, if we don't do to headship some of what we've done to teacher recruitment, we again will fall behind, because the age range, the age group that's going through, there's a smaller group of people in the conventional age range of going ahead to headship.
The middle years.
And we've also got some increased churn now. So those two factors will create problems. But what we've got to do is, again, just like any other business really, and I never get embarrassed about comparing ourselves with another business. We've got to think about, well, how do we solve this? And it will be saying, well, how do we accelerate our really good people and support them better? Now, that's got risks, because they won't be as experienced. And but hold on a minute. What happens if we take some of the more mature people coming in at 25, 30, 35, and we start looking at the way we fast-track them?
And that's a high number, by the way.
It is. I mean, we've got a third of the people now who come in are over 30. There's over 13,000 a year in that age group. Well, I think the people I meet who come in at that age actually do want to move through quickly, and I think we've got to look at what we offer them, how we make sure they've got the skills that we need, and make sure that we've got the training and the preparation. And it's constantly looking at ways we modernise our profession. We're not exempt from that.
All that you're actually describing is sort of a profession that's refound itself. It's a phrase I used to use was reprofessionalisation, sort of redefine itself, find itself and recruit more. And all that's true, and I'm very on board with that. But one of the things which I think is a real dilemma for us, that is, despite all that, you still get a voice from the teacher that doesn't seem to reflect that. So all the statistics, and I genuinely think now that teachers are held in far higher regard than they've ever been before their standing in the community, is better than it has been. And sometimes even now when I'm talking to teachers, I don't get that back from them. They still feel oppressed, not supported, not paid as much, not valued. Is that something that I almost perplexes you? Is it something that you wish you could change?
Oh, I do. It's much better. I mean, if you look at the surveys of teachers' self-esteem, self-value,
it's better than it was, especially the youngsters.
It's definitely gone up. But you're right. There's still something, isn't there, about I almost said us as teachers. There's something about the teachers where we are self-critical.
Yeah.
And I think there's because the job is so often about this very important relationship with children, where you're trying to safeguard them, you're trying to create an environment for them where they can learn. We quite like to control that environment. We find change quite threatening. I mean, everybody does, but I think for teachers, they're trying to hold on to every day being great for the kids, every day being safe.
It's like, you know, it's difficult. To answer the teachers' needs, they need stability, but to answer the challenge of raising standards even further, we need change. How do you manage that? Do you see that as part of your job, to manage those competing forces?
Yeah, what I have to do is to bring the reality of the school and the classroom into the department and make it visible. So that if somebody wants a change, then they're sitting in an environment where they recognise how other things will move as well. And we're trying to build something the department's never had before, which is an operational environment in which you can track what's happening in schools. We can know what heads are thinking. We can interact much more actively. Well, that will bring a discipline. Yeah.
I suppose, Ralph, talking about clarity leads us to the white paper, the recent white paper, the recent education bill, which clearly before your days, and very much a political document. But one of the greatest criticisms at the time was that it lacked clarity. And indeed, much of the political debate, or the debate round that then followed, was an effort, it seemed to me, by ministers and by the department to say, well, hang on, you don't quite understand us, that's not what we meant. Let's just look at that for a minute. Was it a lack of clarity? And if so, how does a department get to a situation where it publishes a document that could be so misunderstood? Or did people change their minds, and therefore it's been a policy in development as it's been discussed, as it's gone along over the last few months?
I think it's a policy where there are different views, or there are different balances. I mean, there are many policies within the white paper. It's a big document, but if we concentrate on the most controversial area, which is about increasing parental choice and increasing the diversity of schools, unquestionably people have different takes on that. And whatever's written down, people have slightly different interpretations. What exactly is the reason for greater choice? What kind of parental choice? How do we manage that without actually making it school choice of parents rather than parental choice of schools? And what's happened is, I think through the white paper and then the bill, is this has been a big, bold new area to go into. I think it's a very important area to go into. But all these different positions have come out very quickly. And the bill's excited all that debate. All the anxieties about does it mean this, does it mean that, but what would happen if, they've come out. And we've been in this big cloud of different issues. And I think that it's one of those moments when the debate is sharpening the intention. And I think we're going to end up through this political process with a much clearer sense of what we are trying to achieve.
Tuesday, two or three things, or two or three words that you think are driving forces behind this piece of legislation that you'd want teachers to actually think, yeah, that's what it's about, and I now understand it. What are those? Is it parental choice? Is it parent power and choice? Is it independence? What is it? Diversity? What is it?
I think two very closely linked ideas. One of them is to give parents and the public more choice. And closely linked to that is the idea of allow there to be a greater diversity of schools, and schools which are properly self-governing, taking decisions for themselves. And I think the two forces in play will be very good. I think that the very interesting thing is about choice. I mean, the first choice, it seems to me, that parents want is to be able to know that their local school is good.
Good enough to go if they choose to go.
Exactly. And I think it's getting that right is the crucial step. You don't have any choice if you don't have a good local school. So that's the first part. And then what it seems to me we're also trying to do is to encourage schools to develop their own character, their own ethos, their own approach, so that parents in the future, parents are getting more demanding. They want more choice in all sorts of aspects of society. And I think if we can create different variety, then I think we'll do something to improve not just choice, but public perception of schools.
Okay, I think you know that what most teachers would say back is, do you mean there's no diversity? Anyway, we've already got that diversity. We've got specialist technology, sports and the rest of it. And I've never yet gone into two schools that smell alike, that look alike, that teach alike. So forget the parental choice. Let's say, think about the diversity. What the bill's actually about is not that. The bill's about diversity of governance rather than diversity of teaching or diversity of style or diversity of ethos. I think what you have to try and explain in order to sell this is why does diversity of governance, if it is diversity of governance, because I think there's an argument about that, why is that going to do the trick that we've not managed to pull off so far? Good
questions. For me, the first steps you're describing into diversity are all about offering choice, encouraging people to find their own.
Be clear, you're not offering anyone any more choice than you did before.
Yeah,
There's still the right to express a preference.
Creating
That's
specialist
all
schools, all those measures that were taken to create specialist schools, all of that's good. But it's unfinished. And there are some things we're still doing on those. I mean, we're now saying, well, actually, specialism hasn't actually created extra choice in many places because there was a wave at first of all the schools that were technology.
Yes, but it's created better schools.
It's created better schools.
Isn't that the key thing?
Absolutely. That's good.
Isn't that the issue? It's meant that more schools are good schools.
That's good.
Isn't that what parents want?
Yes, but it's unfinished. I mean, we've got this group of technology schools, we've got language schools, but we've now recent years started to introduce other specialisms, and we now need to take the next steps, which are to saying to schools where you can have a second specialism, or you can change your specialism if it matches your community better. And I think that's natural progress. Yeah. We've also introduced, it seems to me, in some of our toughest communities, further choice through the academy programme. And again, for some areas, that's giving the area a choice of a good school for the first time.
Well, they are no more than specialist comprehensive schools. I mean, there's...
But it's a different type, and it allows those schools to develop a different approach, a different ethos. And I mean, we're talking about this working.
That couldn't be developed in normal comprehensive schools.
Well, you'd ask yourself why that hasn't happened so far. And I mean, these are communities where the extra investment that's in the academies, it's doing many things that have been done before. But I think by giving it a different cloak and by giving it a different level of resource, we've got a different sort of solution on the ground.
And it will attract a wider mix of kids, which will in itself
Indeed,
help
no,
to
but
extend
if we go now to the governance question, I think it's a natural next step because what we're really doing with the trust arrangements, for me, is to allow schools to say, well, wait a minute, we're starting to create different models, different approaches. Are there new ways that we might, as schools, combine in a different way. And I think the opportunity, we're finding this, that where a strong school has been working with a weak school and helping it, it actually, but it works better if it's not just, you know, a term where the head moves across and helps for a bit, but where they actually start to work together, they share staff, they get lasting. They can do it now.
They can do it now, and I mean, I think this is where my problem comes. It might be interesting to tease it out for people who are listening, is that group governing bodies, shared appointments, joint appointments, all that can happen without the bill, which is where we got to this lack of clarity, really, is to, it's trying to define what is the cinch, the one extra thing in the bill that means all those things that are going on already are going to be seismically, massively more easy to achieve. Or you might want to reflect, you might say, well then, you know, it's just taken us another slight yard or two along the road, and it's not as big a deal as perhaps it was described in the first place.
Yes, I think it is going to be a big deal, actually. The degree of interest that's starting to be shown is much greater, and we think there's genuine interest in schools in deepening the combinations, the collaborations between them, taking it not just to something which can be turned on, turned off, but into a profounder relationship where maybe they pool assets, that you don't just think about, you know, a single secondary school, you know, 3, 4, 5 million budget, combining in 10 million, starting to do their procurement, their staff exchanges. These are different forms of combination where I think it starts to strengthen schools.
I don't disagree, Ralph, and I think maybe you can finish this by saying, and I'm sure you choose not to comment, is after all interdependence, not independence.
Yes. Oh,
that actually makes the difference.
Absolutely. Both.
Ralph, just let me take you back to finish on this. We're both in the same position. We're sort of roughly the same age. We've had a career that's always kept us some way in education, but has taken us a long way from schools. Do you ever wish you were back? Could you go back? Could you do it? Could you stand in front of a class?
I don't know. I could stand in front of a class for a short time, but I'm not sure I'm good enough to...
Could you manage the discipline?
I don't know. I don't know, because that's something you refine, isn't it, in any school? Do you remember changing school even? You end up having to relearn it in a different context. So I rather suspect that I'd have a painful few weeks, maybe months, and have to relearn it again. But I'm not planning to do that in the short term. But equally, I don't want to lose contact with the schools that do it so well.
Ralph Tabra, thank you very much indeed.